You know what's beautiful about ghosts, Victoria? They never see the knife coming from their own team.
The words echoed through the container facility as the massive steel door slammed shut with a thunderous clang. Timestamp 11:47 p.m. Bodycam recording activated. Facial recognition database online. 5 faces. 1 mistake. 0 way out. Victoria Reynolds moved through the Long Beach Container Port parking lot with the measured stride of someone who had walked through danger so many times it felt like coming home. The salt air carried the distant sound of cargo cranes and the hum of late-night operations. But tonight, something felt different. Wrong. Her phone buzzed. Captain Harrison's text. Meeting moved to Lot C7. Steele insisted on the location change. Watch yourself out there. The concern in her former mentor's message should have been comforting. Should have been. But 15 years in the FBI had taught Victoria that comfort was a luxury she couldn't afford, especially when hunting the kind of prey that had made her a legend. Ghost walks among wolves. The nickname had stuck after the Caracas operation 3 years ago. 2 weeks undercover. 37 arrests. An entire West Coast trafficking network dismantled. The kind of operation that made careers and ended lives, sometimes simultaneously. Now, at 35, Victoria Reynolds worked as an independent security consultant, former FBI special agent with a specialty in international gang networks. The kind of reputation that opened doors and closed coffins. Tonight, both seemed equally likely. The first shadow moved between containers at 11:48 p.m. Victoria's hand instinctively moved to the body cam clipped to her jacket lapel. The device looked like an ordinary button, but the technology inside could capture faces from 50 yards in near darkness. Her phone screen lit up with the facial recognition app, algorithms already working to match features against federal databases. The second shadow appeared 30 seconds later, then the third. By 11:49 p.m., Victoria Reynolds found herself surrounded. They emerged from between the towering containers like specters materializing from metal and shadow. 5 distinct groups, each representing a different corner of California's criminal underground. The coordination was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone had orchestrated this moment with military precision. The Sureños came from the east. Their leader, a stocky man with intricate tattoos covering his neck and hands. Carlos Mendoza, according to the database ping that appeared on Victoria's phone screen, wanted for weapons trafficking and conspiracy charges. From the west, the Aryan Brotherhood contingent moved with the swagger of men who had never met a fight they couldn't win. Their spokesman was Jake Morrison, a mountain of a man whose rap sheet included assault, drug distribution, and hate crimes. The Russian mob approached from the north. Anton Volkov led them, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the industrial surroundings. Money laundering, racketeering, the kind of white-collar crime that funded the muscle following in his wake. Ukrainian nationals took position to the south. Dmitry Kozlov's group looked like businessmen, if businessmen carried concealed weapons and had connections to Eastern European arms dealers. The fifth group came straight at Victoria from the front. Middle Eastern network, well-funded and extremely dangerous. Hassan al-Rashid had been on federal watch lists for 3 years, but somehow always stayed one step ahead of charges that could stick. 12 red alerts flashed across Victoria's phone screen. The facial recognition software was having a field day. "Well, well," Carlos said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. The famous Victoria Reynolds, the ghost of Caracas herself. Victoria kept her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. How did they know she would be here? The meeting with Steele was supposed to be confidential. Port security matter, Harrison had said. Routine consultation about gang activity near the docks. Gentlemen, Victoria replied, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. Quite the welcoming committee, though I have to say, your coordination suggests this isn't a chance encounter. Jake Morrison laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Chance? Lady, nothing about tonight is chance. We've been tracking your movements for 2 weeks. The admission should have terrified her. Instead, Victoria felt the familiar calm that came with clarity. These men weren't here to reminisce about old times. They wanted something. 2 weeks, she repeated. That's ambitious planning for a random consultation job, which means either you've been watching David Steele or someone told you I'd be here. Anton Volkov stepped forward, his English accented but precise. Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Reynolds, the woman who dismantled 3 major trafficking operations in 6 months. Very impressive work. Flattery will get you everywhere, Victoria said, her eyes scanning the positioning of each group. Classic encirclement. Professional execution. These weren't street-level dealers looking to make a quick score. But I'm guessing you didn't coordinate 5 separate criminal organizations just to give me a performance review. Hassan al-Rashid spoke for the first time, his voice cultured and educated. Actually, Ms. Reynolds, that's exactly why we're here. We have a job offer. The words hung in the night air like a challenge to gravity. Victoria blinked, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, what? A job offer, Dmitri confirmed. We want to hire you. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Victoria Reynolds, former FBI special agent, scourge of criminal networks from Los Angeles to Seattle, was being recruited by the very people she had spent her career hunting. You want to hire me, she said slowly, processing the impossibility of the statement. The woman who has personally arrested or helped arrest over 200 gang members in the past 5 years. Exactly, Carlos said. Who better to help us solve our problem than someone who understands how law enforcement thinks? Victoria's phone buzzed again. Another message from Harrison. Status update? Steele's getting anxious about the timeline. Timeline. The word carried more weight than it should have. What timeline? Steele had mentioned time sensitivity, but nothing specific about deadlines. Before we dive deeper into what Victoria discovered that night, smash that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and hitting thanks helps me bring you more stories like this. Now, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love connecting with viewers worldwide. If you only had 1 camera and 5 gangs surrounding you, which angle would you prioritize? Victoria had to make this split-second choice. What kind of problem? Victoria asked, buying time while her mind worked through the implications. 5 major criminal organizations didn't coordinate hiring former federal agents unless something had gone catastrophically wrong in their world. Jake Morrison pulled out a tablet, swiping to a photograph that made Victoria's blood run cold. A shipping container, standard 40-foot unit, but with one crucial difference. The manifest paperwork visible in the corner of the image. Container ASSCU 4 471892. This container, Hassan explained, is currently sitting 300 yards from where we stand. It's scheduled to ship out in 48 hours aboard the MV Stellar Pacific, bound for ports unknown. And? Victoria prompted. And it contains 200 AK-47 assault rifles, along with enough ammunition to supply a small army, Anton finished. Problem is, we didn't put them there. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. Weapons trafficking at this scale wasn't just criminal enterprise, it was terrorism. 200 assault rifles in the wrong hands could cause devastation across multiple cities. Someone is using our operational infrastructure, Dmitri continued. Our routes, our contacts, our established shipping channels. But the weapons aren't ours, and we don't know who's behind it. Which means, Carlos added, when those guns are used in whatever operation their real owners have planned, guess who's going to take the blame? Victoria understood immediately. 5 separate criminal organizations, each with established territories and federal heat, suddenly connected to a weapons shipment that could arm domestic terrorists. The perfect setup for a massive law enforcement crackdown that would destroy all their operations simultaneously. "You're being framed," she said. "Exactly," Hassan confirmed. "And we need the ghost of Caracas to help us figure out who's playing puppet master with our lives." Victoria's phone screen lit up with another facial recognition alert. This time it wasn't from the surrounding gangs, a figure moving between containers in the distance, too far away for clear identification, but close enough for the software to register a match against federal databases. FBI personnel detected. "Interesting timing," Victoria muttered, studying the alert details. "How many of your people know about this meeting?" "Just us," Jake replied immediately. Each organization sent one representative. No backup, no witnesses. Why? Victoria held up her phone, showing the FBI detection alert. "Because unless one of you is moonlighting for federal law enforcement, we're not as alone as you think." The 5 gang leaders exchanged glances that could have cut glass. In their world, federal surveillance usually meant only one thing. Someone was about to spend the next 20 years in maximum security. "Options?" Anton asked. Victoria was already moving, her training taking over. "We assume we're being monitored and act accordingly. This meeting never happened, and I was never here. You go back to your territories and wait for my contact." "And if you decide not to help us?" Carlos asked. "Then 200 assault rifles disappear into the shadows, probably to be used against civilians, and 5 major criminal organizations take the blame for domestic terrorism," Victoria replied. "How do you think that story ends for any of us?" The question needed no answer. They all understood the stakes. Victoria's phone buzzed again. Harrison. Steele moved the meeting again. Something about federal interest in the container facility. "Be careful, Vic. Federal interest." The pieces were starting to form a pattern, and Victoria didn't like the picture they were creating. "I need 48 hours, she announced. "Don't move the container, don't change your routines, and absolutely don't try to open it yourselves. If there's surveillance on this operation, any deviation from normal behavior will trigger a response you won't survive." Hassan nodded slowly. "And if you discover we're telling the truth?" "Then we stop whoever's trying to turn you into the perfect scapegoats," Victoria replied. "Because something tells me this is bigger than gang rivalry and weapons trafficking." The meeting dissolved as quickly as it had formed. 5 separate groups melting back into the maze of containers, leaving Victoria alone in the parking lot with her racing thoughts and the growing certainty that she had just stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple consultation job. Her phone rang. Harrison's name appeared on the screen. "Vic, where are you? Steele's been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. "Signal problems at the port," Victoria lied smoothly. "I'm heading to his office now." "What's the urgency about?" "Container security issue. Apparently there's been some unusual activity in the shipping manifests. Federal agencies are starting to ask questions, and Steele wants to get ahead of any potential problems." Federal agencies. Unusual activity. Container manifests. "I'll be right there," Victoria said, ending the call. But as she walked toward the Port Administration building, one thought dominated her mind. How had Captain Harrison known exactly where to send her for this meeting? And why did the timing feel less like coincidence and more like choreography? The Long Beach container port at midnight was a study in controlled chaos. Massive cranes moved like mechanical giants against the sodium-lit sky, transferring cargo from ships to trucks in an endless dance of commerce. Victoria had worked cases here before, but tonight the familiar sounds felt ominous. David Steele's office occupied the third floor of the Port Administration building, with windows overlooking the container yards. At 42, Steele carried himself with the bearing of his Coast Guard background, all straight lines and crisp efficiency. His record was spotless. 8 years in port security, commendations for anti-smuggling operations, and a reputation for running the tightest security operation on the West Coast, which made his current state of agitation all the more concerning. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Reynolds," Steele said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I know the hour is unusual, but we have a situation that can't wait for business hours." Victoria settled into the chair, her eyes taking in the office details. Photos of Steele's family, wife, and 2 teenage children. Coast Guard commendations on the wall. A computer screen showing container tracking data. "Captain Harrison mentioned federal interest in container manifests," Victoria said. "What kind of situation are we dealing with?" Steele pulled out a tablet, swiping to a series of shipping documents. 3 days ago, our automated manifest system flagged an anomaly in container MSCU 44471892. The paperwork shows standard automotive parts, but the weight distribution suggests something significantly denser. Victoria leaned forward, studying the documents. The container number matched exactly what the gang leaders had shown her 30 minutes earlier. "Weight discrepancies happen," she said carefully. "What makes this particular container special?" "The shipping route," Steele replied, bringing up a map on his screen. "This container came from a port in Eastern Europe, transferred through 3 different shipping companies, and is scheduled to depart in 48 hours for a destination listed only as West Coast Distribution. That's not unusual for legitimate cargo." "No, but this is." Steele swiped to another document. The container was paid for with a wire transfer from an LLC that was incorporated 2 weeks ago and has no other business activity. The company address is a UPS store in Nevada. Victoria felt the pieces clicking together. Shell company. Anonymous payment. Vague destination. The hallmarks of an operation designed to avoid scrutiny. "Have you contacted federal authorities?" "That's where it gets complicated," Steele said, his expression darkening. "I reached out to my FBI contacts yesterday. Standard procedure for suspicious cargo. But this morning I received a call from FBI counterintelligence telling me to suspend all inquiries pending their investigation." "Counterintelligence?" Victoria's pulse quickened. "Harrison's division." The call came from Captain Richard Harrison. He said they were already aware of the situation and that any interference from port security could compromise an ongoing operation. Victoria kept her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. Harrison had sent her to meet Steele about container security issues, but he had already told Steele to stop investigating the very container that was causing the problems. "What's your read on the situation?" she asked. Steele was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the computer screen showing the container's location in the yard below. 20 years in security, Ms. Reynolds. Coast Guard before that. I've learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts are screaming that this container represents a threat to public safety. But I also understand chain of command. If FBI counterintelligence says back off, I back off. Unless," he looked up at her, "unless someone with your background agrees that the threat is worth the risk." Victoria found herself at a crossroads. Steele was asking her to validate his suspicions about a container that 5 gang leaders claimed they were being framed for. Harrison had told her this was a routine consultation, but he had also already told Steele to stop investigating. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Container C7 row 15. Midnight inspection. Come alone. A friend. Row 15. That was less than 200 yards from where she sat. Mr. Steele, Victoria said, I'd like to take a look at this container myself. Tonight. Steele nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. But, Ms. Reynolds, if Captain Harrison is right, and this is an ongoing federal operation, we could both be ending our careers tonight. Some things are worth the risk, Victoria replied, but she was thinking about Harrison's convenient advice and the gang leader's claims of being framed. In her experience, when stories started aligning too perfectly, someone was usually lying. The question was, who? Steele provided Victoria with a security access card and a handheld scanner that could read container manifests electronically. The device looked like an oversized smartphone, but contained sophisticated sensors capable of detecting anomalies in cargo weight, density, and even chemical composition. Row 15 is in the high-security section, Steele explained as they walked through the administrative corridors. Containers requiring federal oversight or special handling. The fact that MSU 4471892 is there instead of general cargo suggests someone elevated its classification. Who has that authority? Port security, federal agencies, or the shipping company if they pay premium rates for enhanced security. They emerged into the container yard through a side exit. The scale of the operation was overwhelming. Thousands of containers stacked in precise rows, each one a potential hiding place for legitimate cargo or contraband. Sodium lights created pools of harsh illumination separated by deep shadows. Victoria's phone showed 11:57 p.m. as they approached row 15. Container MSCU 4471892 sat exactly where the shipping manifest indicated. A standard 40-foot unit, distinguishable from its neighbors only by the additional security seals on its doors. Multiple seals, Victoria observed. Standard shipping, federal inspection, and she studied the third seal. What's this one? Steele examined the marking with his flashlight. Special handling authorization. This container has been flagged for federal oversight since it arrived 3 days ago. By whom? The request came through FBI counterintelligence. Captain Harrison's signature is on the authorization. Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Harrison had authorized special federal oversight of the container 3 days ago, but claimed he was just learning about the situation when Steele contacted him yesterday. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Look up. Row 14, container stack 3. Victoria raised her eyes to the container stacked directly above them. A figure moved across the top, silhouetted against the night sky. Too distant for clear identification, but definitely human. Mr. Steele, Victoria said quietly, how many people have access to this section after midnight? Security patrol makes rounds every 2 hours. Next one isn't due until 2 a.m. Steele followed her gaze upward. Wait. Because we're not alone. The figure on the container above them raised something to their face. Victoria caught the glint of glass reflecting the sodium lights. Binoculars. Or a camera. We need to get out of here, Victoria said, her training screaming warnings. Now! But as they turned to leave, Victoria's phone erupted with facial recognition alerts. Multiple targets detected, moving from 3 different directions. Run, she told Steele. The first shots came from the container stacks to their left, not aimed at them, but close enough to send steel fragments ricocheting off nearby surfaces. Victoria grabbed Steele's arm and pulled him toward the narrow corridor between container rows. "What's happening?" Steele shouted over the sound of their footsteps. "Someone doesn't want us examining that container," Victoria replied, her mind cataloging possible escape routes. The container yard was a maze, but it was also a trap. Limited exits, multiple elevated positions for shooters, and nowhere to hide from thermal imaging if their attackers had professional equipment. Her phone rang. Harrison's name on the screen. "Vic, where are you? I'm getting reports of shots fired at the port." "Row 15, Victoria replied, pulling Steele deeper into the container maze. "Someone's trying to stop us from examining MSCU 4471892. Get out of there immediately. I'm sending backup. How did you know to call?" Silence on the line. Then, port security alerted FBI when they detected gunfire. Standard protocol. But Victoria had been with Steele for the past 20 minutes, and he hadn't made any calls. "Captain," she said carefully, "exactly how are you monitoring port security communications?" Another pause. "Vic, this isn't the time for procedural questions. Just get to safety." The line went dead. Victoria looked at Steele, who was checking his own phone. "Any calls from your security team?" "No, nothing." Steele's expression darkened. "My team would have contacted me immediately if they detected gunfire. That's standard protocol." Which meant Harrison had another source of information about what was happening in row 15. Someone who had called him before port security had even detected the shots. Victoria's phone buzzed with a new text from the unknown number. "Service tunnel, container, row 12. Emergency exit. Move now." "Do you know about service tunnels in this section?" Victoria asked Steele. "Underground maintenance access. They run beneath the container storage areas for utility lines and drainage." Steele pulled out his master access card. "But those tunnels aren't on public blueprints. Whoever sent you that message has detailed knowledge of port infrastructure." They reached row 12 as Victoria's phone lit up with another series of facial recognition alerts. The shooters were still tracking them, but maintaining distance. Professional pursuit, designed to herd rather than eliminate. Steele located the service tunnel access panel hidden behind a container support beam. His security card activated electronic locks, and a section of concrete slid aside to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "After you," Steele said. Victoria hesitated. Following an unknown contact into underground tunnels was classic ambush territory. But staying above ground with armed pursuers wasn't exactly safe either. She descended into the tunnel system. The underground infrastructure was more extensive than Victoria had imagined. Concrete corridors lined with utility pipes and electrical conduits, wide enough for maintenance vehicles and lit by emergency lighting. The air smelled of salt water and industrial lubricants. "These tunnels connect to the entire port facility," Steele explained as they moved through the corridors. "Original construction included them for security purposes. Alternative access routes in case of emergency evacuation. Or alternative routes for moving contraband," Victoria added. Her phone buzzed. New message. "Straight ahead, 50 yards. Door marked Electrical Substation 7. Wait inside." They found the door exactly where indicated. Steele's access card worked here too, revealing a small room filled with electrical switching equipment. Clean, well-maintained, and equipped with a computer terminal that was currently active. On the screen, container tracking data for MSCU 4471892. "Holy cow," Steele whispered, studying the display. "This is real-time container monitoring. Weight, temperature, even internal motion detection. Victoria leaned over the screen. The container's weight reading showed significant discrepancies from its manifest. Temperature sensors indicated the cargo was generating heat, and the motion detectors were registering movement from inside the container. "Movement?" Victoria said. "Automotive parts don't move." "No," Steele replied, "but people do." The implications hit them simultaneously. Container MSCU 4471892 wasn't just hiding weapons, it was hiding people. Human trafficking combined with arms smuggling, all disguised as legitimate automotive parts shipping. Victoria's phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Reynolds?" The voice was electronically distorted, but clearly urgent. "You need to listen very carefully. You have approximately 15 minutes before federal agents arrive to secure that tunnel system." "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching this operation develop for 3 weeks. The container you're investigating is the centerpiece of something much larger than gang activity or weapons trafficking." "What kind of operation?" "The kind that uses 5 criminal organizations as scapegoats, while federal agents orchestrate the real crime." The voice paused. "Check your email. I'm sending you financial records that will explain everything." Victoria's phone chimed with an email notification. Attached files showed wire transfer records, corporate filings, and communication logs spanning the past month. Victoria's about to make a decision that changes everything. But first, what would you do if you discovered your most trusted advisor was playing both sides? Drop your strategy in the comments. The financial records painted a picture that made Victoria's blood run cold. The shell company that had paid for container MSCU 4471892 had received funding from 5 different sources, each one corresponding to the territories controlled by the gang leaders who had approached her tonight. But the payments hadn't come from the gangs themselves. They had come from a federal asset forfeiture account, managed by FBI counterintelligence. "This is impossible," Victoria whispered, scrolling through the documents. "What?" Steele asked. "These records show that the FBI has been funding this operation using money seized from the same criminal organizations they're now trying to frame." The voice on the phone continued. "Asset forfeiture laws allow federal agencies to use seized criminal funds for approved operations. But this operation was never approved by Justice Department oversight." Victoria's mind was racing through the implications. Someone in FBI counterintelligence had been using seized gang money to fund a weapons and human trafficking operation, then planning to blame the very gangs whose money had paid for it. "Captain Harrison," she said aloud. "Exactly," the voice confirmed. "Your trusted mentor has been playing a very long game. 3 years of planning, 5 criminal organizations set up as perfect fall guys, and a container full of evidence that will disappear in 48 hours. Steele was reading over her shoulder, his expression growing more grim by the minute. "Ms. Reynolds, if these documents are accurate, we're looking at federal agents committing the exact crimes they're supposed to prevent. And using the gang's own seized money to do it," Victoria added. Her phone buzzed with another message from Harrison. "Vic, I need your location immediately. Federal backup is en route, but we have reports of multiple hostile contacts in your area." Victoria stared at the message, understanding finally clicking into place. Harrison wasn't sending backup to help her. He was sending cleanup crews to eliminate the witnesses who had discovered his operation. "We need to get out of these tunnels," she told Steele. "Now." "Where?" Victoria looked at the computer screen showing container monitoring data. The container. If Harrison wants it to disappear in 48 hours, that means whatever evidence it contains is worth more than the operation itself. "You want to open a container that federal agents are willing to kill to protect?" "I want to document whatever's inside before it disappears forever," Victoria replied. "Because once that container ships out, the evidence disappears with it, and 5 criminal organizations take the blame for crimes they didn't commit. Steele was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Reynolds, if we do this and you're wrong about Captain Harrison, we'll both spend the rest of our lives in federal prison. And if I'm right, and we don't do this, people are going to die. Victoria met his eyes. Your call, Mr. Steele. Steele reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of specialized tools. Port security master keys, he explained. They'll open any container in this facility. Even federal security seals? Every seal has a master override for emergency access. Safety regulation requires it. Steele's expression was grim but determined. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Full documentation, video evidence, and multiple copies of everything we find. Victoria's phone showed 12:37 a.m. as they prepared to leave the electrical substation. The voice on the phone had said 15 minutes before federal agents arrived to secure the tunnels. That gave them maybe 8 minutes to reach the container and begin their examination. One more thing, Victoria said. If Harrison is behind this operation, he knows exactly where we are and what we're doing. We have to assume that every move we make is being monitored. Then why hasn't he stopped us already? Victoria considered the question. Because he needs us to open the container. If federal agents break into it, there will be official records and oversight. But if we do it and then disappear, he can claim we were working with the gangs to steal the contents. So we're walking into a trap. Yes, Victoria confirmed. But it's a trap he needs us to spring, which means we have more leverage than he thinks. They left the electrical substation and moved through the tunnel system toward row 15. Victoria's phone showed continuous facial recognition alerts as federal agents took positions throughout the container yard above them. The trap was closing. But Victoria Reynolds had spent 15 years in federal law enforcement, and she understood something Harrison might have forgotten. Sometimes the best way to escape a trap was to make sure it caught the person who set it. Container MSCU-4471892 waited in the sodium-lit maze above them, holding secrets worth killing for. In 7 minutes, Victoria would discover just how far corruption could spread through the institutions she had once trusted with her life. The tunnel system beneath row 15 emerged through a maintenance hatch located directly behind the container stacks. Steele's access card worked on the electronic locks, but opening the hatch would expose them to anyone monitoring the area from elevated positions. Motion sensors, Steele explained, pointing to small devices mounted on nearby container frames. Standard security equipment, but someone could be monitoring them remotely. Victoria studied her phone screen. The facial recognition app showed federal agents positioned in a rough perimeter around the container yards, but with notable gaps in coverage. Either poor tactical planning or deliberate blind spots. They want us to reach the container, she said. This whole thing is choreographed. To what end? Control the narrative. If we open the container and find evidence of crimes, Harrison can claim we planted it. If we open it and find nothing, he can claim we were working with the gangs to steal legitimate cargo. Victoria checked the time. 12:41 a.m. Either way, we become the criminals, and he stays clean. Steele was examining the container seals with his flashlight. 3 different locking mechanisms, standard shipping, federal oversight, and this third one I've never seen before. Victoria moved closer. The third seal bore markings that her phone's database couldn't identify. A combination of numbers and letters that seemed more like a code than a standard security designation. Can you open them? The first 2, yes, but this third seal? Steele photographed the markings with his phone. This isn't standard port security equipment. It's something custom-made. Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Harrison's name on the screen. She answered. Vic, Thank goodness. Where are you? Safe, Victoria replied carefully. The shooters seem to have moved on. Good. I need you to get to extraction point Charlie 7 immediately. Federal backup is en route, but we want you clear of the area before they begin their operation. What operation? Container interdiction. We've confirmed MSCU 4471892 contains contraband. The container will be seized and its contents examined by federal agents. Victoria met Steele's eyes. When? 45 minutes. The paperwork is already in motion. 45 minutes. Just enough time for Victoria and Steele to open the container, discover whatever Harrison wanted them to find, and then be arrested as the criminals responsible for the contents. I'll head to Charlie 7, Victoria lied. Good. And Vic, whatever you do, don't approach that container. We have reason to believe it's been booby-trapped. The line went dead. Booby-trapped? Steele asked. Harrison's getting creative with his lies, Victoria replied. He wants to make sure we understand the stakes. Steele had managed to remove the first two seals using his master tools. The third seal, however, was more sophisticated. Electronic locks with what appeared to be biometric scanners. I can't open this without the right fingerprint or access code, Steele said. Unless what? Unless we override the entire system. Steele pulled a tablet from his security kit. Every container has emergency access protocols for safety purposes. If I can convince the system that this is a life-threatening emergency, it will override all locks. What constitutes a life-threatening emergency? Motion from inside the container combined with elevated temperature readings. Steele connected his tablet to the container's monitoring system. The sensors are already showing both. Victoria watched as Steele's fingers moved across the tablet screen, manipulating the sensor data to trigger emergency protocols. Within 30 seconds, all three locks disengaged with soft clicks. Impressive, Victoria said. Coast Guard training. We were taught to prioritize human life over security protocols. Steele gripped the container door handle. Ready? Victoria activated her body cam and aimed her phone's camera at the container doors. Document everything. Steele pulled the door open. The first thing that hit them was the smell. Unwashed bodies, fear, and the metallic scent of weapons. Emergency lighting strips activated automatically, revealing the container's contents. 23 people, mostly women and children, huddled against the far wall. Crates of assault rifles stacked along the sides. Boxes of ammunition. And in the center of the container, a sophisticated communication setup with multiple screens showing what appeared to be federal law enforcement communications. Holy cow, Steele whispered. Victoria was already moving, her phone camera recording everything. Are you injured? She called to the people in the container. A woman near the front of the group spoke in accented English. No injured, but very afraid. They said we would be in America for work, but this is not work. Human trafficking. Exactly what the motion sensors had detected. Victoria turned her attention to the weapons crates. Military-grade assault rifles still in factory packaging. The kind of firepower that could arm a domestic terrorist cell or trigger a gang war that would justify massive federal intervention. But it was the communication equipment that made Victoria's blood run cold. Live feeds from FBI counterintelligence operations, real-time monitoring of gang territories, and most damning of all, recorded conversations between Captain Harrison and unknown contacts discussing the timing of container shipments and elimination of witnesses. Steele, Victoria called. You need to see this. Steele approached the communication setup as Victoria scrolled through the recorded files. Harrison's voice was unmistakable, discussing payments to gang territories, arrangements for container security, and plans for federal raids that would eliminate the criminal organizations after they had served their purpose. "This is a recording of federal agents planning crimes," Steele said in disbelief. "Not just planning," Victoria replied, pointing to a file labeled Operation Ghost Protocol. "Executing. This entire operation was designed to eliminate 5 major criminal organizations while generating millions in asset forfeiture revenue. The plan was elegant in its corruption. Use seized gang money to fund weapons and human trafficking operations, blame the gangs for the crimes, then seize even more assets during the federal raids that would follow. A perpetual cycle of crime and enforcement that generated revenue for the agents orchestrating it." Victoria's phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Reynolds, you need to get those people out of that container immediately. Federal agents are moving into position for a controlled burn." "A what?" "Harrison's final solution. The container and its contents will be destroyed in what appears to be a gang-related explosion. 23 witnesses eliminated, evidence destroyed, and 5 criminal organizations blamed for domestic terrorism." Victoria looked at the terrified faces around her. These people had been trafficked into the country as unwilling participants in a federal corruption scheme, and now they were going to be murdered to protect that scheme. "How long do we have?" 15 minutes before the charges detonate. But Ms. Reynolds, Harrison's people are watching every exit from that container yard. Getting 23 people to safety without being detected is going to require a miracle. Victoria ended the call and turned to Steele. "We need to evacuate these people, and we need to do it without Harrison's people realizing what we're doing." "The tunnel system," Steele said immediately. "It connects to service exits throughout the port facility. We can move them underground. 23 people through tunnels designed for maintenance crews. It's the only way that doesn't involve crossing open ground under federal surveillance." Victoria addressed the group in the container. "We're going to get you to safety, but you need to follow our instructions exactly. Stay together, stay quiet, and trust us." The woman who had spoken before nodded. "We trust you. These people, they are not good people. They lied to us about America." As they began organizing the evacuation, Victoria's phone buzzed with a final message from Harrison. "Vic, I need you to confirm your position immediately. We're about to begin the federal operation, and I need to know you're clear of the target zone." She didn't reply. Instead, Victoria Reynolds, former FBI special agent, began the most important operation of her career, saving 23 innocent lives while exposing the corruption that threatened to destroy everything she had once believed in. The tunnel system that had seemed spacious for 2 people felt claustrophobic with 25. Steele led the group through the maintenance corridors while Victoria brought up the rear, her phone tracking federal positions above ground through the facial recognition app. "The explosion is set for 1:15 a.m., the unknown voice had said. Victoria's phone showed 12:58 a.m. as they moved through the concrete corridors beneath row 15s. 17 minutes to get 23 people to safety and preserve evidence of the most sophisticated corruption scheme she had ever encountered. The rescued victims moved with the quiet determination of people who had survived worse circumstances. Many appeared to be Eastern European, consistent with the container's shipping origin. All adults, but some barely so, young women who had been promised legitimate work in America, and instead found themselves trapped in a federal crime syndicate. "Service Exit 7 is 300 yards ahead," Steele called back. "It emerges near the Port Administration Building, which should be clear of federal surveillance." Victoria's phone buzzed. Text from Harrison. "Vic, please respond. We're detecting unusual activity in the tunnel system. Need to confirm you're not in danger." Harrison knew they were in the tunnels, which meant he had access to more than just container surveillance. He was monitoring the entire port security system in real time. "Change of plans," Victoria called to Steele. "Exit 7 is compromised. Where else can we surface?" Steele checked his tablet. "Emergency exit 12. It's further from the administration building, but it connects to the public parking area outside port security." "How far?" "Half a mile through the tunnel system." Victoria calculated the timing. Half a mile with 23 people who were already exhausted and terrified. 15 minutes before Harrison's explosion eliminated all evidence of his operation. "We won't make it," she said. Steele stopped walking and turned to face the group. "Actually, we might, but not all together." "What do you mean?" "The tunnel system has multiple branches. If we split the group, we can use 3 different exits simultaneously. Smaller groups move faster, and it divides Harrison's response." Victoria understood immediately. "And if his people are monitoring all the exits? Then at least some of the witnesses survived to testify. It was a calculated risk with lives at stake. But staying together in the tunnels meant everyone died in 17 minutes. "Do it," Victoria decided. They divided the group into 3 sections. Steele would lead 8 people to exit 12. Victoria would take 8 others to exit 9. The remaining 7 would go with the woman who had spoken English, following tunnel maps that Steele quickly sketched on his tablet. "Exit 7, even though Harrison knows about it," Victoria told the 3rd group. "Sometimes the obvious choice is the safest because it's the most obvious." As the group separated, Victoria's phone rang. Harrison again. This time she answered. "Captain, I'm clear of the target zone. Exit 7 tunnels, heading to surface now." "Thank God, Vic. The federal operation is beginning in 12 minutes. We've confirmed the container contains terrorist weapons and human trafficking victims." "Terrorist weapons?" 200 assault rifles and 23 foreign nationals who appear to be part of a sleeper cell operation. Victoria felt sick. Harrison was already crafting the narrative that would justify the explosion. The victims would be branded as terrorists, their deaths explained as necessary national security measures. "Captain, what about questioning the foreign nationals? They might have intelligence about the operation." "Unfortunately, our intelligence suggests they're heavily indoctrinated and unlikely to cooperate. The priority is preventing whatever attack they were planning." Translation: dead witnesses can't contradict the official story. "I understand," Victoria lied. "I'll be clear of the area in 10 minutes. "Good. And Vic, outstanding work tonight. This operation is going to save lives." The line went dead. Victoria's phone showed 1:07 a.m. as she led her group through the tunnel system toward exit 9, 8 minutes before Harrison's explosion. Above them, federal agents were positioning for a terrorist interdiction that was actually a mass murder designed to protect institutional corruption. But Victoria Reynolds had spent 15 years learning how federal law enforcement actually worked. She understood evidence preservation, witness protection, and the importance of documentation that couldn't be destroyed by convenient explosions. Which was why, as she moved through the tunnels beneath Long Beach Container Port, she was simultaneously uploading every piece of evidence to cloud storage accounts that Harrison couldn't access or destroy. The ghost of Caracas was about to make her final appearance. But this time, the ghosts she was hunting wore federal badges and hid behind institutional authority. 7 minutes until the explosion that was supposed to end this story. Victoria Reynolds intended to make sure it was only the beginning. Exit 9 emerged behind a maintenance building 50 yards from the port's main security checkpoint. Victoria's group of 8 trafficking victims moved with desperate silence, understanding that their lives depended on the next few minutes. Her phone showed 1:12 a.m., 3 minutes before Harrison's explosion would eliminate all evidence of his operation. The surface was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Victoria's facial recognition app detected no federal agents in the immediate area, which meant Harrison was confident his explosion would solve all his problems. But 15 years of federal law enforcement had taught Victoria that overconfidence was the most dangerous mistake an operative could make. "Stay behind the building," she whispered to her group. "I need to check the perimeter." Her phone buzzed with a message from Steele. "Exit 12 successful. 8 people safe in civilian area. Moving to rendezvous point." 1 down, 2 to go. Victoria crept around the maintenance building's corner, scanning the container yard in the distance. Row 15 was barely visible through the maze of stacked containers, but she could see the glow of emergency lighting around the target area. Federal agents were maintaining their perimeter, waiting for 1:15 a.m. Her phone showed another message, this one from the third group. "Exit 7 compromised. Federal agents waiting. Need alternative route." Victoria's heart sank. 7 people trapped underground with federal agents blocking their escape route. 2 minutes until explosion. She called Steele. "David, the third group is trapped at exit 7. Harrison's people are waiting for them. There's a service ladder that connects exit 7 to exit 8, Steele replied immediately. "Emergency override access. They can bypass the federal agents if they move now." Victoria forwarded the information to the third group, then checked her phone's cloud storage upload. 97% complete. The evidence that would destroy Harrison's career and expose his criminal network was almost safely preserved beyond his reach. 1:13 a.m. Her phone rang. Harrison's name on the screen. "Vic, where are you? We're getting some unusual readings from the port security system." "Heading to my car," Victoria lied, "almost clear of the area." "Good. The operation begins in 90 seconds. Federal agents are reporting suspicious movement near several tunnel exits. We think the terrorist cell might be trying to escape." Terrorist cell. Harrison was already committed to his narrative. "Any chance they could be civilians caught in the wrong place?" Victoria asked, testing his response. "Negative. Intelligence confirms all individuals in the target area are hostile combatants. Rules of engagement are clear." Rules of engagement. Harrison was giving his people permission to shoot anyone who emerged from the tunnels. "Captain," Victoria said, "I'm recording this conversation for my incident report. Can you confirm that federal agents have been authorized to use lethal force against unidentified individuals?" Silence on the line, then, "Vic, why are you recording this conversation?" "Standard procedure for federal operations involving civilian areas. Justice Department oversight requires documentation of all tactical decisions. There is no Justice Department oversight on this operation." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Harrison had just confirmed that his federal operation was unauthorized, unsupervised, and illegal. "Captain, are you saying this operation lacks proper authorization?" "I'm saying you need to stop asking questions and get clear of the area. Now." The line went dead. Victoria's phone showed 1:14 a.m. 60 seconds until explosion. A new message from the third group. "Exit 8 successful. All 7 safe. Federal agents still waiting at exit 7 for targets that won't come." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. 23 innocent people were alive and free. Harrison's explosion would destroy the container and its evidence, but it wouldn't eliminate the witnesses who could testify about federal agents trafficking humans and smuggling weapons. Her phone's cloud storage showed 100% upload complete. Every piece of evidence from the container's communication system was now preserved in multiple secure locations that Harrison couldn't access or destroy. 50 seconds. Victoria's facial recognition app suddenly exploded with alerts. Federal agents moving rapidly toward all 3 tunnel exits. Someone had realized the targets had escaped. Her phone rang immediately. Harrison again. "Victoria, I know what you've done." "What have I done, Captain?" "You've interfered with a federal counterterrorism operation and aided in the escape of enemy combatants. I've documented federal agents committing crimes and rescued innocent victims of human trafficking. Those people are terrorists, Victoria, and you've just made yourself an accessory to domestic terrorism." Victoria looked at her group of 8 terrified women huddled behind the maintenance building. Mothers and daughters who had been promised honest work in America and instead found themselves trapped in a federal crime syndicate. "These people aren't terrorists, Richard. They're victims, and you know it. What I know is that you have 60 seconds to surrender yourself and return those individuals to federal custody, or you become a fugitive." "What I know," Victoria replied, "is that I have documented evidence of federal agents using seized criminal assets to fund human trafficking and weapons smuggling operations. Evidence that's already been uploaded to secure servers beyond your reach." Silence on the line. "You're bluffing," Harrison said finally. Container MSCU 4471892 had a sophisticated communication system that recorded every conversation you've had over the past 3 weeks, including your discussions about using gang money to fund trafficking operations and your plans to eliminate witnesses through controlled explosions. Another pause. Longer this time. "Even if that's true, Victoria, who's going to believe the word of a disgraced former federal agent over a decorated FBI captain?" The recorded conversations speak for themselves, along with the financial records showing wire transfers from federal asset forfeiture accounts to shell companies, and the timestamp data proving you were coordinating gang activities while supposedly conducting federal investigations. Victoria's phone showed 1:15 a.m. In the distance, Row 15 erupted in a controlled explosion that lit up the night sky. Container MSCU 4471892 disappeared in a ball of flame that could be seen for miles. "There goes your evidence," Harrison said on the phone. "There goes the container," Victoria corrected. "But the evidence was uploaded to secure servers 20 minutes ago, along with live footage of federal agents murdering innocent civilians to protect their criminal operation." "What are you talking about?" "Check your tactical teams, Captain. How many of those enemy combatants did they actually eliminate?" Victoria could hear Harrison speaking to someone else, his voice muffled but urgent. Then he came back on the line. "The tunnel exits were empty." "Exactly. 23 potential witnesses to your operation are now safely in protective custody with local law enforcement agencies that aren't under your control, along with video evidence of their rescue and testimony about their trafficking experience." The silence stretched for 30 seconds. "What do you want, Victoria?" "Justice. You surrender yourself to FBI Internal Affairs within 1 hour, along with complete documentation of Operation Ghost Protocol. Your co-conspirators do the same, and the victims you traffic receive full federal protection and assistance." "And if I refuse?" "Then at 7 a.m., every major news network in California receives copies of the evidence I've collected. Your operation becomes front-page news, and federal oversight investigates every case you've handled for the past 5 years. Harrison was quiet for a long time. Victoria could almost hear him calculating odds, weighing options, trying to find an escape route from the trap that was closing around him. "You realize this destroys both our careers," he said finally. "Your career was destroyed the moment you decided to use federal authority to commit the crimes you were supposed to prevent," Victoria replied. "Mine gets a chance to start over." "Victoria, 59 minutes, Richard. Internal Affairs Full confession, or I release everything." She ended the call. Victoria's group of 8 women looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. They had heard enough of the conversation to understand that their ordeal might finally be over, but experience had taught them to be cautious about trusting authority figures. "Are we safe now?" asked the woman who had spoken English in the container. "You're safe," Victoria confirmed. "But we need to get you to a secure location where you can give statements to federal investigators who aren't connected to the people who trafficked you." "What happens to us after that?" Victoria considered the question. These women had been brought to America illegally, but as victims of federal crimes rather than willing participants. Immigration law provided protections for trafficking victims, but the process would be complicated by the fact that federal agents had been their traffickers. "You'll have options," Victoria said. "Witness protection, immigration assistance, help returning to your home countries if that's what you want. The important thing is that you're free to choose." Her phone buzzed with a message from Steele. "All groups safe. Local law enforcement coordinating victim protection. Federal agents requesting permission to question you about the explosion." Victoria smiled. Local law enforcement meant Harrison's people couldn't control the narrative or eliminate witnesses. The investigation was now beyond his reach. She replied to Steele, "Tell them Special Agent Victoria Reynolds will provide a full statement about tonight's events, including federal misconduct and evidence of corruption in FBI counterintelligence." Another message, this one from an unknown number. "Outstanding work, Agent Reynolds. FBI Internal Affairs has been investigating irregularities in Captain Harrison's operations for 6 months. Your evidence provides the missing pieces we needed." Internal Affairs. Victoria felt a wave of relief. Harrison's corruption hadn't gone completely unnoticed. Federal oversight was already aware of problems. They just hadn't been able to prove them until tonight. She called the number. "Agent Reynolds? This is Deputy Director Catherine Walsh, FBI Internal Affairs. I understand you have evidence related to unauthorized operations conducted by Captain Richard Harrison." "Deputy Director, I have extensive documentation of federal agents using seized criminal assets to fund human trafficking and weapons smuggling operations, along with recorded conversations and financial records proving systematic corruption. We need to meet immediately. Can you bring the victims to a secure federal facility for protection and debriefing?" Victoria hesitated. After everything she had discovered about federal corruption, the idea of turning the victims over to more federal agents felt dangerous. "With respect, ma'am, these victims have been traumatized by federal agents. I'd prefer to coordinate through local law enforcement until we can verify the integrity of federal protective services." "Understood. Agent Reynolds, are you aware that Captain Harrison's operations may extend beyond human trafficking?" "What do you mean?" "We have reason to believe Operation Ghost Protocol was designed to destabilize criminal organizations in preparation for federal takeover of their territories. Human trafficking and weapons smuggling were just the beginning." Victoria felt the scope of Harrison's corruption expanding. "Take over how?" "Create chaos through gang warfare funded by federal operations, then use emergency powers to federalize local law enforcement and seize control of criminal territories. Essentially, using crime to justify the expansion of federal police power." The implications were staggering. Harrison hadn't just been stealing from criminals, he had been orchestrating a federal coup disguised as law enforcement. "How many other operations like this?" Victoria asked. "We've identified similar patterns in 4 other major cities: Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, all under Captain Harrison's coordination, all using seized assets to fund criminal activities that justify expanded federal intervention." Victoria's phone showed 1:43 a.m. as she processed the scope of Harrison's conspiracy. Not just corruption, but systematic subversion of local law enforcement across the entire West Coast. Deputy Director, how do we stop this? With your evidence and the testimony of tonight's victims, we can expose the entire network. But Agent Reynolds, we need to move quickly. Harrison's people are already trying to control the narrative about tonight's events. What kind of narrative? Terrorist attack on port facilities, foreign nationals attempting to smuggle weapons for domestic terrorism, federal agents heroically preventing a major attack on civilian targets. Victoria understood. Harrison was still trying to spin tonight's events as successful counterterrorism rather than exposed corruption. The explosion would be evidence of federal agents stopping a terrorist plot, not destroying evidence of their own crimes. The victims can contradict that narrative, Victoria said, only if they survive to testify. Agent Reynolds, we have reports of unknown federal agents asking local law enforcement for custody of the individuals you rescued. Victoria's blood ran cold. Harrison was making one final play to eliminate the witnesses. Unknown federal agents? Credentials that check out in federal databases, but orders that can't be verified through normal channels. Classic signature of black operations. How long do we have? Local law enforcement is stalling, but they can't hold federal agents indefinitely without proper documentation. Maybe 2 hours before custody transfers. 2 hours to ensure 23 trafficking victims didn't disappear into federal custody controlled by the same people who had trafficked them. Victoria looked at the 8 women still huddled behind the maintenance building. They trusted her to keep them safe, but the forces arrayed against them included federal agents willing to commit murder to protect their operation. Deputy Director, what's the fastest way to get these victims into legitimate federal protection? Federal court order placing them under protective custody pending investigation. But that requires a federal judge willing to issue emergency orders at 2 a.m. Can you make that happen? I can try. But Agent Reynolds, until that order comes through, those victims are in extreme danger. Harrison's people know they're the only witnesses who can destroy the official narrative. Victoria's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Steele. Federal agents demanding immediate transfer of all rescued individuals. Local police requesting your assistance to verify for federal authority. The endgame was beginning. Harrison's people were making their final move to control the witnesses and preserve their narrative. But Victoria Reynolds had spent her entire career learning how to outmaneuver federal bureaucracy when it threatened innocent lives. We're about to witness the moment Harrison's entire operation unravels, but there's still one more twist that even Victoria didn't see coming. The timestamps tell a story that will blow your mind. Stick around for the reveal that changes everything we thought we knew. Harrison thinks he's won, but Victoria has one final card to play. Can you guess what evidence she's been holding back? Deputy Director, Victoria said, I need federal marshals, not federal agents. People outside Harrison's chain of command who can provide genuine protection for these witnesses. Federal marshals report directly to the Justice Department, not FBI. They can provide independent protection, but only with proper documentation. Then get me that documentation, because I'm not turning these victims over to anyone until I'm certain they won't disappear into the same system that trafficked them. As Victoria spoke, her phone's facial recognition app began detecting movement around the maintenance building. Federal agents were approaching from multiple directions, their positioning suggesting tactical formation. Deputy Director, we're about to have company. Harrison's people have found us. Agent Reynolds, do not let those individuals take custody of the witnesses. I'm coordinating federal marshal response, but you need to buy us time. How much time? 20 minutes for emergency court order. 40 minutes for federal marshals to reach your location. Victoria looked at the 8 terrified women depending on her protection. 40 minutes seemed like an eternity when facing federal agents willing to commit murder. But Victoria Reynolds had earned her reputation by doing the impossible under pressure. The ghost of Caracas was about to make her final appearance, and this time she wasn't hunting criminals. She was hunting the criminals who wore badges. Her phone showed 1:57 a.m. as unmarked federal vehicles surrounded the maintenance building. Through the windows, Victoria could see tactical gear and weapons that meant these agents weren't interested in negotiation. Harrison had made his choice. Now Victoria would make hers. She turned to the group of women behind her. "I need you to trust me one more time. We're going to walk out of this building together, and we're going to do it in a way that makes it impossible for these people to claim you were terrorists or criminals." "How?" asked the English-speaking woman. Victoria smiled grimly. "By making sure every moment of what happens next is recorded and broadcast live." She activated her phone's live stream function and connected to social media platforms that would preserve the footage even if federal agents tried to confiscate her device. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said to the camera, "this is former FBI Special Agent Victoria Reynolds, and I'm about to show you what happens when federal agents try to eliminate witnesses to their own crimes." The live stream went active at 1:59 a.m., just as the first federal agents approached the maintenance building entrance. The confrontation that followed would either save 23 innocent lives or destroy the last honest federal agent willing to fight institutional corruption. Victoria Reynolds stepped toward the building entrance, her phone camera recording everything, as federal agents prepared to take custody of the witnesses who could expose the most extensive federal corruption scandal in modern American history. The maintenance building's entrance opened before Victoria could reach it. 3 federal agents entered with weapons drawn, their tactical gear identifying them as specialized operators rather than standard FBI personnel. "Agent Reynolds," the lead operator said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "You're interfering with a federal counterterrorism operation. Stand down immediately." Victoria kept her phone's live stream focused on the agents while positioning herself between them and the trafficking victims. "Agent Reynolds requesting your identification and operational authority. This is being broadcast live, so please state your name and the federal agency authorizing your presence." The lead agent hesitated. In the age of social media, federal agents couldn't simply refuse to identify themselves on camera without raising questions about their legitimacy. "Agent Thomas Mitchell, FBI Counterterrorism Division. These individuals are suspected enemy combatants who must be transferred to federal custody for questioning." "Suspected based on what evidence?" Victoria pressed, her camera capturing every word. "Intelligence reports indicating terrorist activity at port facilities." "What intelligence reports? From which agencies? And why aren't these suspects being processed through standard federal arrest procedures with legal representation?" Agent Mitchell's expression hardened. Victoria was asking questions that legitimate federal agents would have ready answers for, but black operations personnel weren't prepared for public scrutiny. "Agent Reynolds, you're obstructing federal law enforcement. Cease your recording and surrender the suspects immediately." "I'm documenting federal law enforcement to ensure proper procedures are followed," Victoria replied. "And these individuals are trafficking victims, not suspects. They've committed no crimes and are entitled to legal protection." Her phone showed the live stream had over 2,000 viewers in just 3 minutes. Comments were flooding in from law enforcement professionals, legal experts, and concerned citizens demanding transparency about what they were witnessing. "Ma'am," one of the trafficking victims said in heavily accented English, "these men, they look like the men who brought us here. Same clothes, same weapons. The statement hit the live stream like a bombshell. Viewers were watching trafficking victims identify federal agents as their traffickers. Agent Mitchell stepped forward aggressively. "End that broadcast now, or you'll be arrested for interfering with national security operations." National security operations require proper documentation and oversight, Victoria replied, her years of federal training evident in her calm professionalism. "I'm requesting to see the court orders, federal warrants, or Justice Department authorizations that support this operation. Those documents are classified. Federal arrest warrants aren't classified. Neither are court orders for protective custody. If these individuals are suspected terrorists, you should have public documentation justifying their detention." Victoria's phone showed the live stream had reached 5,000 viewers. Comments included messages from attorneys offering legal assistance, journalists requesting interviews, and law enforcement officials demanding accountability. Agent Mitchell spoke into his radio. "Control, we have a problem. Target is broadcasting live and refusing to comply." A voice crackled back. "Maintain position. Alternative solutions en route." Alternative solutions. Victoria understood the code. Harrison was sending people to end the live stream permanently. "Ladies," Victoria said to the trafficking victims, "I need you to move closer to me. Stay in camera view at all times." Her phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Director Walsh. "Federal Marshal Team, 10 minutes out. Federal court order approved. Hold position." 10 minutes. Victoria needed to keep 8 trafficking victims safe for 10 more minutes while facing federal agents who were willing to commit murder to protect their operation. The maintenance building's rear entrance opened. More tactical agents entered, but these wore different uniforms. U.S. Marshals Service insignia. "Agent Reynolds," the lead marshal called out. "Deputy Marshal Sarah Chen, U.S. Marshal Service. We have federal court orders placing these individuals under protective custody, pending investigation of federal crimes." Victoria felt a wave of relief. Real federal law enforcement, with proper documentation and legal authority. Agent Mitchell turned toward the marshals. "These individuals are under FBI custody as part of an ongoing counterterrorism investigation."
"Not according to our federal court order," Deputy Marshal Chen replied, producing official documents. "These individuals are trafficking victims, not terrorism suspects. They're being placed under federal protection as material witnesses. Your court order is invalid. This is a national security matter." "Then produce the classified orders that supersede a federal court's jurisdiction," Chen challenged. "Because until you do, these witnesses remain under federal marshal protection." Victoria's live stream captured the entire confrontation as 2 sets of federal agents disputed custody of trafficking victims. The optics were devastating for Harrison's narrative: legitimate federal law enforcement protecting victims while mysterious agents with questionable authority tried to claim them as terrorists. Agent Mitchell spoke into his radio again. "Control, federal marshals have court orders. Request guidance." Harrison's voice came through clearly. "Abort operation. Repeat, abort and withdraw." Victoria's phone camera caught every word. Harrison's orders to withdraw federal agents who were supposedly conducting legitimate law enforcement operations. Agent Mitchell and his team began moving toward the exits, but Victoria called out, "Agent Mitchell, for the live stream record, can you explain why FBI counterterrorism agents are withdrawing when federal marshals arrive to protect trafficking victims?" Mitchell stopped at the entrance. "No comment." "Can you explain why Captain Richard Harrison ordered you to abort a legitimate federal operation?" Mitchell's eyes widened. Victoria had just revealed that she knew about Harrison's direct involvement and had recorded his orders to withdraw. "Agent Mitchell,
Deputy Marshal Chen added, "Please remain available for questioning about this incident. FBI Internal Affairs will want to speak with everyone involved in tonight's operations." The tactical agents left without another word, their rapid departure captured on Victoria's live stream for thousands of viewers to witness. Deputy Marshal Chen approached Victoria. "Agent Reynolds, I need to formally transfer these witnesses to federal protection. Are they willing to provide statements about their trafficking experience?" Victoria translated the question for the group. The English-speaking woman nodded. "We will tell truth about what happened to us, about men in federal clothes who lied and hurt us." "Ma'am," Deputy Marshal Chen said gently, "you're safe now. We're going to make sure you have legal representation, medical care, and protection while you decide what you want to do." Victoria ended her live stream as federal marshals began the process of properly protecting the trafficking victims. Her phone showed over 8,000 people had watched the confrontation, with hundreds of comments from legal professionals, journalists, and law enforcement officials demanding investigation of the federal agents who had fled when confronted with proper authority. Her phone rang. Deputy Director Walsh. "Agent Reynolds, outstanding work. Your live stream just provided evidence of federal agents operating without proper authority and fleeing when confronted by legitimate law enforcement. What happens now? Now, we build the case that ends Harrison's operation permanently. Your evidence from the container, combined with witness testimony and tonight's confrontation, gives us everything we need to prosecute federal agents for trafficking, corruption, and abuse of authority." Victoria looked at the trafficking victims being gently processed by federal marshals. 23 innocent people who had survived corruption at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. "Deputy Director, what about the other cities? Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, Las Vegas?" "Simultaneous operations are beginning as we speak. Harrison's entire network is being rolled up based on the evidence you provided. By morning, the largest federal corruption scandal in decades will be front-page news." Victoria's phone showed 2:37 a.m. 3.5 hours since 5 gang leaders had approached her in the container yard with an impossible story about being framed by federal agents. 3.5 hours that had exposed corruption, reaching the highest levels of federal law enforcement, and saved 23 innocent lives. "Agent Reynolds," Deputy Director Walsh continued, "FBI Internal Affairs would like to offer you a position leading the task force investigating federal corruption in law enforcement. Interested?" Victoria looked around the maintenance building where federal agents had just tried to eliminate witnesses to their own crimes. Then she looked at the trafficking victims who were finally receiving the protection they deserved. "Yes," she said, "I'm very interested." Her phone buzzed with one final message from an unknown number. "The ghost of Caracas rides again. Congratulations on outstanding work. A grateful colleague." Victoria smiled. Some ghosts, she had learned, came back to haunt the living. Others came back to protect them. At 2:45 a.m., Captain Richard Harrison was arrested at his home by federal marshals carrying warrants for human trafficking, weapons smuggling, corruption, and conspiracy charges. The arrest was broadcast live on social media by neighbors who had seen Victoria's live stream and recognized the importance of documenting everything. By 3 a.m., similar arrests were happening in Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, as federal agents who had used their authority to commit crimes learned that their victims had survived to testify against them. The container explosion that was supposed to eliminate all evidence had instead become the catalyst for exposing the most extensive federal corruption network in modern American history. At dawn, Victoria Reynolds stood in the Long Beach container port, watching the sunrise over the facility where she had discovered that the greatest threats to justice sometimes wore federal badges. But she had also learned that institutions could be redeemed when honest people refused to accept corruption as inevitable. The trafficked victims were safe in federal protection, providing testimony that would send their tormentors to prison for decades. The 5 gang leaders who had approached her with an impossible story were cooperating with federal investigations, their territories no longer threatened by agents masquerading as law enforcement. And Victoria Reynolds, former FBI special agent, was about to become the leader of a federal task force dedicated to ensuring that badge and authority never again became tools for the crimes they were supposed to prevent. Her phone rang. Steele's name on the screen. "Ms. Reynolds, I wanted to thank you for last night. 23 people are alive because you chose to believe an impossible story and act on evidence instead of authority. Thank you for choosing to help, David. Without port security cooperation, none of this would have been possible." "What happens to the port now?" Victoria looked out over the container facility, thinking about the legitimate commerce that flowed through here every day, and the criminals who had tried to exploit that commerce for their own gain. "Now it becomes what it was always supposed to be," she said. "A place where honest people do honest work, protected by law enforcement that serves justice instead of corruption." 3 months later, Victoria Reynolds sat in her new office at FBI Internal Affairs, reviewing reports from field agents investigating federal corruption across 12 major cities. The task force had expanded beyond anyone's original expectations as more victims came forward and more evidence emerged of federal agents using their authority to commit crimes. Harrison had pled guilty to 47 federal charges and was serving life in prison without parole. His network of corrupt agents had been dismantled, with convictions ranging from trafficking to money laundering to conspiracy. The 5 gang leaders who had first approached Victoria were serving reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation. Their territories now managed by community organizations focused on legitimate economic development rather than criminal enterprise. And the 23 trafficking victims had received federal assistance to rebuild their lives, some choosing to remain in America as protected witnesses, others returning to their home countries with compensation for their suffering. Victoria's phone buzzed with a new case notification. Federal agents in Denver suspected of using seized assets to fund gambling operations. Another day, another opportunity to prove that justice was stronger than corruption. She stood up from her desk and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, honest law enforcement officers were protecting civilians from criminal threats. But also, somewhere out there, other federal agents might be using their authority to become the threats they were supposed to fight. Victoria Reynolds, the ghost of Caracas, would be hunting those agents for as long as they existed, because she had learned that the most important battles for justice were often fought not against criminals in the streets, but against corruption in the institutions trusted to protect society. Her phone rang. New case. New opportunity to prove that badges belonged to those who honored them. "Special Agent Reynolds, Federal Corruption Task Force. How can I help you?" The work continued. The ghost walked among wolves, but now she hunted the wolves who wore badges. Justice, Victoria had learned, wasn't a feeling. It was a file that outweighed denial. And some files, once opened, changed everything. The container yards of Long Beach hummed with legitimate commerce as honest port workers moved legitimate cargo under the protection of honest law enforcement. Somewhere in those containers were the products and materials that kept America's economy functioning. None of them contained weapons for terrorists or victims of federal trafficking operations. The ghost of Caracas had made sure of that. As the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, casting long shadows across the container facility where corruption had been exposed and justice had prevailed, Victoria Reynolds drove home knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges in the endless fight to protect the integrity of American law enforcement. But tonight 23 people were sleeping safely in their own beds, free from the federal agents who had trafficked them. 5 criminal organizations were rebuilding their communities through legitimate economic development, and a network of corrupt federal agents was serving time in federal prison instead of planning their next crimes. The ghost of Caracas had haunted her last corruption network. Special Agent Victoria Reynolds was ready to begin her next case. The badge meant something again, and Victoria Reynolds intended to keep it that way. 6 months after the Long Beach container port incident, FBI Director James Morrison stood before a joint session of Congress to announce the most comprehensive federal law enforcement reforms in American history. The Federal Corruption Task Force has investigated over 200 cases of federal agents using their authority to commit crimes, Morrison testified. Thanks to the courage of whistleblowers like Special Agent Victoria Reynolds, we have identified and prosecuted corruption networks operating in 15 major cities. Victoria watched the testimony from her task force office, where reports of new cases arrived daily. Local law enforcement agencies that had once feared federal oversight now requested task force assistance in investigating suspicious federal operations. The victims of federal trafficking operations had received over $50 million in compensation, with additional funds allocated for counseling, legal assistance, and job training programs. Many had become advocates for law enforcement reform, working with the task force to identify warning signs of institutional corruption. David Steele had been promoted to Regional Port Security Director, implementing new procedures that made container facilities less vulnerable to criminal exploitation. The Long Beach port had become a model for legitimate international commerce, protected by honest law enforcement. The 5 gang leaders who had first approached Victoria were nearing the end of their reduced sentences, their territories transformed through community investment and economic development programs funded by recovered criminal assets. What had once been centers of illegal activity were becoming centers of legitimate business and education, and Captain Richard Harrison spent his days in maximum security federal prison, his life sentence a reminder that no one was above the law, especially those entrusted with enforcing it. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from one of the trafficking victims. "Agent Reynolds, I wanted you to know that I started college this semester, studying criminal justice. Someday I want to help people the way you helped us." Victoria smiled. The next generation of law enforcement would include people who understood the difference between authority and justice, between badges and honor. Her phone rang with notification of a new case. Federal agents in Miami suspected of using hurricane relief funds for personal enrichment. Special Agent Victoria Reynolds, leader of the Federal Corruption Task Force, picked up her case files and prepared to hunt the wolves who wore badges. The ghost of Caracas had become something better, a protector of the innocent and a guardian of institutional integrity. Justice wasn't a feeling. It was a commitment that outweighed convenience. And in America, that commitment was stronger than any corruption network that tried to subvert it. Next week, the hurricane relief worker who discovered federal agents stealing disaster funds meant for homeless families. Same corruption, different coast, and this time, the victims included children. Some stories end. Others become the beginning of something better. The Federal Corruption Task Force was just getting started. Victoria's computer screen displayed a map of the United States dotted with red pins representing active investigations. Each pin represented a community where federal agents had forgotten their oath to serve and protect. Each pin represented victims who deserved justice. Her desk phone rang with reports from field agents across the country. Phoenix, federal border agents selling immigration documents. Chicago, DEA agents redistributing seized narcotics. Atlanta, federal marshals embezzling witness protection funds. The corruption was deeper and wider than anyone had imagined. But for every red pin on Victoria's map, there was also a blue pin representing honest federal agents who had chosen courage over complicity. Whistleblowers who risked their careers to expose misconduct. Veterans who remembered their oath. Rookies who refused to accept corruption as normal. The blue pins were growing faster than the red ones. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from one of the Long Beach trafficking survivors. "Agent Reynolds, my citizenship ceremony is next month. Will you be there?" She smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." 23 people had been trafficked by federal agents. 23 people had survived to rebuild their lives in the country that had first betrayed and then protected them. Their stories had inspired congressional action, judicial reforms, and a generation of law enforcement officers who understood that badges were earned through service, not authority. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Victoria's office as she reviewed the day's reports. Corruption exposed in Denver. Reform implemented in Seattle. Community trust rebuilt in Phoenix. The work was endless, but so was the impact. Her computer chimed with a priority message from Deputy Director Walsh. "Victoria, we've received a credible report about federal disaster relief agents in Louisiana, hurricane survivors reporting missing aid supplies, and suspicious federal operations. Can your team investigate?" Natural disasters created vulnerable populations that predators exploited. Federal disaster relief provided cover for criminal operations disguised as humanitarian assistance. The pattern was familiar, but the victims were always unique. Victoria opened a new case file and began typing her initial assessment. Somewhere in Louisiana, federal agents might be stealing from hurricane survivors. Somewhere in Louisiana, victims needed protection, and criminals needed prosecution. The ghost of Caracas had taught Victoria that justice required constant vigilance against those who would abuse the authority meant to protect society. Special Agent Victoria Reynolds had learned that institutional integrity demanded eternal commitment from those who chose to serve honestly. Her phone rang with another case notification. Texas. Immigration fraud. Federal agents selling false documentation to desperate families. Victoria Reynolds picked up her badge, checked her weapon, and prepared for another battle in the endless war between justice and corruption. Outside her window, the American flag flew over a federal building where honest agents investigated dishonest ones, where victims found protection and criminals found consequences. Some ghosts haunted the guilty. Others protected the innocent. The Federal Corruption Task Force was just getting started, and Victoria Reynolds intended to make sure it never stopped.
You are not alone. Someone wants to hear you. Share your story. Thank you for watching to the end. Please like and subscribe to Stereo.